Hello, everyone. Oh, yeah, it's on. Hiya, my name is Harriet, and I'm very pleased to welcome you tonight to Follow Me to Pieland, a talk and multi-sensory feast which will be delivered to you by Professor Andrew Holmes. The event accompanies the exhibition Roadwork, which is on show in Montague Street and concludes this Saturday. So if you haven't been already, do go and visit it. The exhibition brings together Polaroids that Andrew took in 1985 of the cars, trucks and streets of Los Angeles. And they were first shown here at the AA in 1986 as part of the exhibition Hundreds of Things. And yeah, we've been so delighted that we could show them here again 40 years later, but still as bright and still casting. Still wearing denim, double denim, and casting your very sharp eye.
I'm going to be there on Friday and Saturday from 4 till 8, if anybody wants to drop by.
There you go, if you would like a guided tour from the man himself. The exhibition and talk coincide with a new book, also titled Roadwork, published by Circa Press, that you can buy tonight at the back of the room after the event. So without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Andrew. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So the last time I was stood here, I talked about the day John Cage came here and I spent a day with him, talking to him and asking him questions and receiving very straightforward replies. For those who don't know John Cage, they may know his famous work, 4 minutes, 33 seconds, which he wrote in 1951. Usually people call it silence. But what everybody doesn't know is that a year later he wrote another piece called 0 Minutes Zero. And but that wasn't performed till 1964, I think, in Tokyo. And it was, I have to look up the name, it was performed by Toshi Ishinaga, something like that. I apologise for not getting it right. But the other person you would know who performed it was Yoko Ono. It was performed on a Wednesday, the 24th of October, 1962, beg your pardon. I said 64. And by coincidence, it was also performed that same Wednesday night in New York. The instructions for the piece, 0 Minutes Zero, are: in a situation provided with maximum amplification, brackets, no feedback, perform a disciplined action. Well, the piece that was played in New York in Harlem was actually recorded in the Apollo Theatre, and it was played as the 8th piece recorded that night, and conforms exactly to Cage's criteria, and we're going to play it in a minute. The performance artists were James Brown and his Famous Flames. We don't have a film of it, of that particular recording, but we have one 3 years later, from the 1st of February in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we also have, on that date, he recorded Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. And it's unusual. And it featured the guitarist Jimmy Nolen, who we see here. We will see in a minute if it comes out as Jimmy. And he introduced the 9th chord into popular music. Now, again, I'll have to read what a 9th chord is for those who aren't musical, and perhaps even for those who are musical. The essential 9th chord is the E9, played with short staccato strums on beats 2 and 4, often just on the top 3 strings, B, G, and D. And that gives it that classic funk sound, which is part of a 12-bar blues progression. It also uses A7th and B7th chords. The 9th chord adds colour, the 9th note to a dominant 7th chord, creating a richer, funkier texture essential to the song's groove. And when he was interviewed for the band, James Brown asked him, "Can you play the 9th chord?" "Yes, of course," came the reply. Yes, but can you play it all night? This little section is about repetition. It's physically incredibly demanding and requires the ultimate discipline. The guitar is played like a drum. The guitar is set up with a single coil pickup and requires the ultimate tuning with treble up and no mid-range at all. What he invented that day was called the chicken scratch, and it's the basic of funk music. And so I'm going to play an extract of the 1964 recording of the piece that was played in 1962. And let's go to it. Let's turn the volume up. Yeah, it's good. Should be good to go. Yes, it's exhausting. I like the fact he's still got dust on his knees because that's the fourth time they had to record that particular song. Anyway, no time to wipe your knees, get a cloth on the knees. You had to carry on. Wonderful. Sort of ecstatic. But country music is not ecstatic. That's concerned with heartbreak and the tragic. And the ninth chord doesn't appear in country music till Bobby Gentry's Ode to Billy Joe. And I was exhausted out there. Don't know how to go on. We're going to go back to my childhood, back to repetition again. So I was born in Bromsgrove, as everybody knows, has a unique connection with light industry and technically innovative construction. Bromsgrove Station is at the bottom of the steepest railway incline in Britain and also has the steepest incline of flight of locks. So it built the world's biggest tank engine to push trains up the incline. And I used to have tea with a Mr. Allbutt, whose job was to fill the tank engine with water. And here's Mr. Allbutt on the left, a small man in a coat. And that photograph is taken about 50 yards from his house, which is the other side of the water tower that fed the engines. Normally there would be 3 or 4 tank engines to push any loco up. But the advantage of being young, as I could wander around the station, couldn't do it now, and would have tea, my 11s, with the people on the station, the porters. I would look not unlike this. In fact, I didn't put long trousers on until I was 13. But if you were on the upside of the platform, you could look, absolutely eyeball the piston rods and all the couplings within a couple of feet. So it was wonderful. When they were coming down, they were on the other side, and you could see trains in side elevation, as it were, see the whole train. But of course, I had a book like this, a Railway Locomotive Spotter's book, and I would cross out, of course, all the engines that I saw, all the locos, and I knew nothing about really. I wasn't a train spotter. I was the only person there, apart from the porters. I was reading Jenny Diskey's book just recently, What I Don't Know About Animals. And her father used to take her to the zoo every Wednesday here in London, and her mother used to take her to the Selfridges. So she had a complete view of the world, completely 2 different views. But my parents didn't take me anywhere. I went there on my own.
37.
So we'll just go back, if we can. That's what I mean. The ones on the other side you could see in elevation. So I always rather liked elevation drawings of things and photographs, and still do. And that's where it comes from. Now, we're going to show you some film taken more or less at the same time.
Approaching from the south on the up relief line is salt list 44218 on coal empties. At the station, another of salt list 4Fs.
That's my side of the platform.
Has another load of coal empties. As 2 bankers blast their way onto the incline, note the point on the down line into the platform and down relief line. It was said to have the finest switchblades on the region. Trains with no leading bogie would certainly lurch over this turnout.
Oh, yes. So what you don't get is the smell, though, of sulfur dioxide, which is very, very powerful. But I realised as a very young boy that the modern world is made up of identical things, and lots of them. So you'd get 80 of those coal trucks going up the line. And so that led me, after a while, to decide when I was here at the AA to do a series of drawings, all identical size. And since there would be 100 coal trucks, there had to be 100 drawings, obviously. So I set off, age 20-odd, to make 100 drawings. It's now 150 drawings. This obviously is the photo of the show here a year and a half ago. So everything was made to look like a 35mm slide. So in a square frame, all the proportions are those of a photograph. But if you do that for 15 years, you suddenly wake up one morning and you can't move. I literally got out of bed, sat down in a chair, and had to phone 999 to get a ambulance to take me to hospital, where they eventually unwound me and found out I'd slipped a disc. So that meant no drawing. So I had to find things to do. And I could stand up but not sit down. The surgeon asked me how long I'd been drawing. He said, 15 years. He said, well, that will do it. So this was painting about 6 foot by 4 foot. Seemed right to paint something called Shut Down, as I'd stopped drawing. And I used an airbrush. But I always somehow find ways to break things and mess them up so they don't quite work how people like Philip Castle would use airbrushes. So here is the MP air gun, a classic thing used for painting cars. Paint goes in the top there, and use high pressure air to blow paint down through a needle through a series of nozzles, which we take them apart, look like this. But you will see close up that I've managed to bend the needle. At first I did it accidentally. Then I realized if you turn the pressure down, you could get a spatter effect, which is much more interesting and less glitzy than anything that Philip Castle was doing. I mean, he died about 2 months ago, so we're about the same age. He's a little older than I am. So then you couldn't really take that to America. So the question was, and I've been traveling in America, obviously, by then about 15 years, and moved from the East Coast via New Orleans to Los Angeles, and discovered Bakersfield. And a lecture a couple of years ago, rather like this, I was asked, why Bakersfield? I said, because it's exactly like Bromsgrove. It is and it isn't. Bakersfield is here. It's north of Los Angeles. You see it in the bottom right, the grey area of the tight grid. And it's at the southern end of the San Joaquin Valley, which is the second or third richest agricultural land in the world, and produces 30% of all the USA's food in terms of fruit and vegetables. It also produces 500,000 barrels of oil a day. So that's actually what it looks like. That's the neighbouring town associated with Bakersfield. That's Oildale. So the little bits of brown you see in the previous image are the oil fields, and then obviously they go off to the left and the right, well, mainly to the left, because the right you just see the beginning of the foothills of the Sierras. So I might have to read you something here. About the San Joaquin Valley. Despite a water shortage, is one of the richest farming lands with an ideal climate in the world, producing, say, a third of the country's fruit and vegetables. It produces 400 different crops. But Bakersfield lies at the junction of Route 99, which runs north-south in this case, and Route 58, east-west, with Interstate 5 to the west. The semi-trailers that travel these roads are mobile barns in which the crop is ripened by ethylene as it travels. Ethylene acts as a signalling hormone, triggering enzymes that break down cell walls, convert starches to sugars, and change colours, turning green bananas yellow. Fruits are often harvested in a mature green state, which is firm and less susceptible to damage during shipping. Ethylene is then added to trigger the ripening process, so the fruit reaches the retail outlet at the perfect stage for consumption. Well, this obviously needs semi-trucks. And truck drivers need rest, food and coffee. And the drivers travel the route from Bakersfield, travelling south on the I-5 and then east on the I-10. So that's a lot of coffee. And a lot of coffee is drunk. So this map shows Bakersfield towards the left, and then a little circle to its left. To the west is indeed button willow, beg your pardon, which is about 3 or 4 truck stops. And then you can see the 5 goes south to LA, and then you can change over to the 10 that goes due west to Milliken Avenue, where there are 2 truck stops. We'll talk about the 10 later. So this is what the San Joaquin Valley looks like, with half-mile fields, and you can see the irrigation circles, and you can see the brown areas where the oil wells are. And that's 50 miles wide and about 400 miles long. So the trucks park usually head on or tail on to the sun, depending. Initially, when I was there, they'd leave the motor running and the aircon on, but now they have built these gantries, so you just plug into the gantry and you don't hear the engines anymore. But it'd be typically, when I was photographing, it was be 95 degrees in the shade, so roughly 105 to 110 out where I was photographing. And as you see, this truck is pointed into the sun, so it has its windshield is covered. And what I was going to use was Polaroid cameras, and this is what the situation is now, 40 years later. So what I was using was a land camera, which folds up very nicely and goes in the pocket and is transportable on the plane, but then folds out like this. And you haven't got much control over it, except you can twiddle one knob and you can change the exposure. So I would turn it all the way up to the maximum underexposure, so the images were dark as possible. So it meant you had to have the sun behind you. And then I produced, thanks to Polaroid, who gave me 100 boxes of 10 Polaroids, gave me 1,000. I did a show here in 1986 called Hundreds of Things. And this was the ideal truck stop, which was 365 trucks. So some of those survive and some they're in the show. The containers, probably each one will probably contain, even then, $500,000 worth of goods. And there'd be perhaps 50 trucks in a truck stop. So I had to look anonymous. So I'd have this particular jacket and a grey shirt and jeans and a black case to carry around the camera. And the truck driver was very nice. They showed me the secret entrance through the mesh, so I can go in there without the management knowing. And there are all kinds of trucks. Obviously, there's oil transported. So oil would come down from Bakersfield, and the fruit in the rectangular containers. And of course, this just shows pretty much what the slope of the light was in the winter, and the kind of construction of the boxes themselves. So the road itself, this is Route 10. This is a series of Polaroids taken from the bridge. And I did the following year a video piece, a show called The Golden Hour. So there were 10 two-hour tapes, which included at the end the golden hour itself, which is the reason the cinema industry, the movie industry, is there, because of the quality of light, of the golden light in about 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So that takes something like, I think there are 550,000 cars driving in Los Angeles in any one rush hour. There are some 7.5 million cars in Los Angeles. There are more cars than people. And then there's the trucks are on top of that. And they have to park somewhere. And this is an aerial view of Los Angeles, one of their many now car parks. So there's about 50,000 to 60,000 cars parked in the parking lots at LAX every day. So I had to go out again in the sun and walk the parking lots with my camera. And this is where being a child and looking at trains as it were, at most people's knee level helped, because I would actually be on my knees photographing these cars. So at the end of the day, after kneeling in hot asphalt, I'd have black knees, unlike James Brown with his grey knees. But the only place to get a drink then was the building you'll see later, the Encounter, which was called then the Space Age restaurant in the middle of the Los Angeles, what would we call it, conglomeration of buildings. It was a wonderful, wonderful interior. And the bathrooms were brilliant. So you could get a drink there. So you'd need to drink probably every 40 minutes, every 45 minutes. And it was a long, hot day. So people lived somewhere too. And so I'd walk and drive the streets of Santa Monica and beyond, photographing houses. And I began to speculate about the owners of the houses, who might live there. And as a result of that, I started to go with my friend Stuart to Bouquet Canyon, which was a live firing range out in the desert, up in the hills, just below the lakes, which into which the water flows for Los Angeles, and that generates the power, water power, hydropower. So in amongst us, this is a bunch of 50 to 150 lunatics with high-powered rifles and pistols shooting at car parts and, of course, signs, road signs. So I'd have to get up very early there. In fact, I'd get up there about 6 o'clock, and there'd still be 2 people there before me. And I was there to pick up something, which I'll show you in a minute. But I would walk from Stuart's house down to Santa Monica Pier, and the first little booth on the left-hand side is a shooting range, of course. And these are portraits of the prizes you win. So these are the suspects. So you can get 100 different little cuddly toys on the range. So this is what I rescued, which is a bit of a car. There's a car door. So I had to walk out into the shooting range. I did ask people to stop shooting, but they carried on. But I'm here. But what is intriguing is the border now is the sheer quantity of shells, cartridge cases on the ground. And I eventually put them all together rather than isolating them into one big 2-metre high piece called All the Usual Suspects. The grey area in there, second ring out, is the snakes, the dead bits of tyres on the road. So I'd collect those as well as the signs, and of course the sign saying no shooting. So there was lettering on that last piece, so I began to think about lettering, and I started to think about what made a particular street up, because this was now a garden that was a desert. So every tree on 26th Street has a tree in front of it, an oleander. And I started thinking about writing. And I started thinking about the ingredients of this place. What turned it from a desert? What it meant to people as an image, as a system. And why they gardened it in particular ways. But it was also, every house had a car outside it. So this was a kind of poem to that effect. And also I began to be interested in the shape of lettering as well. So I treated the letters like objects, like the photographs. So it was another poem. Then the problem, of course, in this book that we've just done is what to write. So I was thinking, well, how would I write about this place if I was an actual writer? So this is my favourite house on 26th Street. I beg your pardon, it's 25th Street. The couple who lived there lived there till relatively recent, about 2010, but they always had this cutlass parked outside. It was always parked in the same spot. I began to see them, and you don't see many people. This is the only people you'll see in 2 hours. She just walks by. So this was about year 2000, and everybody was interested in the apocalypse and what would happen in the new millennium. And I began to read about it and started a series of drawings called Progress. But doing that, I wondered who might now be John Bunyan's hero, Pilgrim himself from Pilgrim's Progress, which is a dream. So I reinvented Pilgrim in the modern manner as a woman for a start with, because he wrote a second book, which is about Pilgrim's wife. So my Pilgrim is a woman who is a private detective who drives the streets of Los Angeles and California to investigate crimes. But being a dream, she can kind of walk through doors and can walk into any house. So this is one of about 20 pieces, and this is highly edited. A visit to one house. And I'm going to have to read this. In the short half block, ended by the iron fence, were only 2 houses on opposite sides of the street and almost directly across from each other. The smaller was number 623. There's a plane flying overhead. I drove past it, turned the car in the paved half circle at the end of the street, and came back to park in front. The house was built downwards, one of those clinging vine effects, with the front door little below street level, the patio on the roof, the bedrooms in the basement, and a garage like the corner pocket of a pool table. A crimson bougainvillea was rustling against the front wall, and the flat stones of the front walk were edged with Korean moss. The door was narrow, grilled and topped by a lancet arch. Below the grille there was an iron knocker. I hammered on it. Nothing happened. I pushed the bell at the side of the door and heard it ring inside, not far off, and waited. And nothing happened. I worked on the knocker again. Still nothing. I went back up the walk and along to the garage and lifted the door far enough to see that a car with white-walled tyres was inside. Off to the left, beyond the parking space, there was a sunken garden with a fountain at each of the four corners. The entrance was barred by a wrought iron gate with a flying Cupid in the middle. There were busts on light pillars and a stone seat with crouching griffins at each end. There was an oblong pool with stone water lilies in it and a big stone bullfrog sitting on one of the leaves. Still farther, a rose colonnade led to a thing like an altar, hedged in at both sides, and yet not so completely but that the sun lay in an arabesque along the steps of the altar. Far over to the left there was a wild garden, not very large, with a sundial in the corner, near an angle of the wall that was built to look like a ruin. There were flowers. There were a million flowers. I went up the stone steps and half of the big double doors swung open noiselessly. The hallway was bigger than all the floor space in the house I was living in. It had a tessellated floor, and there seemed to be a stained glass windows at the back, and if there had been any light coming through them, I might have been able to see what else was there. From the hallway, I went through some more double carved doors into a dim room that couldn't have been less than 20 foot long. I stepped outside the door and listened. I didn't hear any sound of movement inside, so I didn't knock. Downstairs, the living room looked bright and empty. I put out some of the lights. From over near the front door, I looked up at the balcony. The middle part of the living room rose to the full height of the house and was crossed by open beams that also supported the balcony. The balcony was wide and edged on two sides by a solid railing, which looked to be about 3.5 feet high. The top and uprights were cut square to match the crossbeams. The dining room was through a square arch closed off by double louvered doors. The sitting room seemed to be deliberately 20 years out of date. It had overstuffed furniture and brass doorknobs, shaped like eggs, and a huge wall mirror in a gilt frame, a marble-topped table in the window, and dark red plush side drapes by the windows. I sat down in a chintz chair and looked around. The place was old-fashioned. It had a false fireplace with gas logs and marble mantel, cracks in the plaster, a couple of vigorously coloured paintings on the walls that looked good enough to have cost money, an old black chipped styway, and for once no Spanish shawl on it. There were a lot of new-looking books in bright jackets scattered around. A double-barrelled shotgun with a handsomely carved stock stood in the corner with a white satin bow tied around the barrels. I cut all the lights except one standing lamp and crossed to the study. The door was shut, but 2 lamps were lit, a standing lamp at the end of the leather couch and a cowled desk lamp. The typewriter was on a heavy stand under this, and beside it on the desk there was a disorderly mess of yellow paper. I sat in a studied chair and studied the layout. As I sat in the chair, the phone was at my left hand. There was a lot of stuff on the desk, including a row of books between bronze elephants and an old-fashioned square glass inkwell. I stood up and switched the cornice lights. A square metal waste bucket was over against the wall, with paper spilled. The drinking liquor was on the cocktail table in front of the couch. An empty bottle, another 3/4 full, a thermos, jug of water, and a jug of water that had been ice cubes. It was only 1 glass, and it was the large economy size. Well, times changed. I reckoned when I did the piece originally, that people would see the age of the cars and the trucks more than anything else. In fact, the first thing that someone noticed when they looked at the book was that the round headlights of the trucks were disappearing. They were now rectangular. But other things have changed politically since, and people will probably see the trucks very differently now than they would then, if they're interested in the trucks at all, of course. The original idea, of course, was to do with oil, because I did some work for a monthly magazine called Petroleum. And one of the articles I read back then was that we had enough oil for 300 years for the whole world's population, if including the increase in population, if everybody used oil to the same level as the average suburban American. There was a problem, though. Most of that oil was in a line between what was then the USSR and Iran. It was east of that. So that began to make me think that this might be a problem, as it is now. And there would be fighting about it, as there is now. So in 1966, when I first went to the US, the population was 250 million. In 2026, the population is 350 million. So it's increased by 100 million in the time I've been visiting the States. And that creates a huge problem. 20 million of those people live in mobile homes, mostly in the poorer states like New Mexico, Mississippi and Alabama. But there's another problem. In 1803, Napoleon sold to President Jefferson 800,000 square miles of territory, so doubling the size of the US. In the 1840s, immigrants went from Missouri to foreign countries across the Great American Desert. The American Desert didn't appear on any maps at all. It was not coloured in. So you went to Oregon, which is British, or to California, which is New Mexican state, which is Spanish. So you were going abroad. It was a patchwork to half the continent. And then the problem started in 1845, the idea. In 1845, the editor of the New York Morning News wrote that it was the manifest destiny of the United States to overspread and to possess the whole of the continent, which Providence has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty and federated self-government entrusted to us. So, here we are. So a lot has changed since I've been visiting the States in 1966. This is a photograph taken in 1960 of the 405 crossing the mountains, going into the valley, the San Fernando Valley, and towards Bakersfield, you can see in the top right-hand corner. The last time I visited the States, there was a fire under the 10. This is I-10, just about half a mile west of Central Avenue and my favourite, Alameda. And Route 10 was closed for a week. There was no traffic on it. So they basically did the work in 5 days instead of 5 weeks, because it's such an important road. When the earthquakes came, they rebuilt the whole thing in 72 days rather than 3 years. Route 10 runs from the Pacific to the Atlantic. It's the only one that does, and it goes pretty much in a straight line, and is the chief connection between the US Navy's fleet in the Pacific and what they have going on in the Atlantic. And during the time of the filming of No Country for Old Men, they were building a southern spur down through Marfa, Texas, so that to the port down there on the Gulf, and also obviously to the airfield there from which they fly bombing missions halfway around the world. And the only condition of making the film was that the town of Marfa should appear in the film. One of the themes of the film is about American foreign policy. So probably Route 10 is the most important road in the world. But we go back on this theme of concrete, and here we see the Encounter restaurant behind Chevrolet Impala, which is where I would get my drinks of water while taking the Polaroids out in the 110-degree heat. So here's a couple of images from the Polaroid show. And times have changed in other ways too, because now everything is digital. So these things in the gallery are rather antique and must seem rather strange to young students today. But of course, being a fiddler of things and a bender of prongs on airbrushes, I've tended to fiddle around with things digital. So I would obviously put them together and as if they were parking together in the same space. But then I began to do odd things to them. The wonders of AI. I won't talk much about imagination. Someone asked me what my motive was, and I've always lived in my mind. I would go to the train station on my own. I would draw on my own as a child all the time. So they're not fantasies. They're always based on reality. And I work every day. So now we come to the final thing. I've overstayed my welcome probably, about what we had to write for the book. I decided to write lyrics for a song made up of 6-syllable, 2 lots of 6 syllables in a line, and then set it to music. Yeah.
Tan bungalow feature porch, wrought pine curlicues, bushes clipped evergreen, garage roller door, ranch style feature chimney, cars out front, hoods up, work to do on the engine bay, color Shalimena gold, Cadillac Coupe de Ville, a 2-door hardtop, and a bark bar Fisher, seats real leather, interior Fleetwood gold, wears a white bucket hat, shirt 2-tone blue-eye pink. off $1,200. Love those body lines, deluxe interior, gold cloth, got every option. AM, FM, 8-track stereo, door when it opens, interior light switches on. 80,000 miles, seats, door panels, and headliner, bright chrome beauty rings, remote control mirror, embossed floor mats, as new as 72. Freightliners and those Peterbilts, a lot full today. Since 10 a.m. this morning, 10 feet needle low, 1972. Stainless steel visor, 13-speed tandem XL, has Rayco spring ride, 359 Cummins motor. Smoking deal. We've been playing loud and clear. Sounds great on these speakers. There ain't nothing wrong with the radio. With the radio. Skateboard, go-go girls and a juice box, call Super Van Gogh, shippers go with murals, leap before you break, hazmat with the zebra stripe, I like carriers, flying donut yard dog, Alabama chrome, pigtails to the reefer.
Now ready. Shower number 63. World's #1 mover. Park. Bring papers. Sign.
10-10 on the side. Head to the stack of bricks.
Thank you for your patience. That's our band, which is called Alabama Chrome. For those who don't know, Alabama Chrome is rust. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there and ask anybody's got any questions. We'll do that. And I'll just play some imagery while you ask questions, or sit there quietly being lovely and peculiar. Well, you must be peculiar because it's much better outside. Sorry I talked so long.
Have you ever thought, or have you ever done any NFTs? I think this place
So I have anything what?
An NFT. So they're the digital art pieces.
Oh, right, yeah. No. I'm not very digital. Well, I'm visual, but I'm not numeric, I think. When you're at a drawing board, you don't meet many people. And since nobody phones anymore, everybody emails, I'm not a typist either, you see, so I live a very narrow life. So, yeah.
One thing it made me think of is the renewed novelty of bygone eras. One thing it made me think of is the renewed novelty of bygone eras. So I wanted to ask if and how your relationship to these objects has changed as time has passed.
Relationship to which, sorry?
As these objects that you've drawn and photographed has changed.
Oh, right, yeah. Good question. What's my relationship to these old objects? I mentioned briefly that the turn of the century, I started reading what everybody was writing and emailing about the end of the world was going to happen. And I was particularly interested in the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, because I know it also as a drawing, or an etching rather, by Albrecht Dürer of, and I should probably say who the Four Horsemen are. They arrive to announce the end of the world. So the first horseman is on a white horse, and he has a gold sword and crown, and he's the Antichrist, who's someone who professes to be a Christian, but actually isn't. He's a kind of warlord. The second is on a red horse, and he is war, and he has obviously a red sword and so on. And the third is pestilence and famine. He wears black, and usually is rather fat, wears a kind of velvet jacket, and silver. And the last is Death himself, who actually rides what's known as a pale horse. It's green, in other words, the colour of a rotting body. And he rides a skeletal horse. I decided to reinvent them as cars. So I bought 4 Ford Thunderbirds from the 1970s, 74, 75, 76 and 77, which coincided with the first oil wars, and when the Ford had to reduce the length of the car from 20 feet to 18 feet. As a consequence, it was the biggest selling Thunderbird ever, the 74. So I bought each of these in the correct colours, and found the man, the wonderful Mr. Mario d'Alba, who built lowriders out in about 50 miles from Los Angeles at Montclair. I could show you the pictures of them if we just skip this little bit. So there, there's me. There's Mario in the middle, and Albert, his cousin. And there are the 4 cars in order. And of course, they're being a front elevation man, I photographed them in the front elevation. Their job was to drive somewhere to announce the end of the world. They might arrive at your local Tesco, what it might be. Whatever it was, it had to be a building with a big parking lot in front. And of course, they had to drive, ideally, down the freeway 4 abreast, but in line was all right. Of course, you could buy a Ford Thunderbird for about $4,000 then. Now, if I were to buy one that cost me $40,000. They've suddenly become popular again. So this is the first one. This is the first horsemen, white and gold, and so on. They would appear at night. And so the skeleton car, this is the last is Death here in the foreground, was painted in photoluminescent paint, and which is a perfect light green, and it glows for about an hour or so, or 2 hours, depending, what the day's been like in the dark. It's self-charging, obviously, but the body was drilled in the formation of the stars at midnight as we turned from 1999 to 2000, and inside were UV lights which would light it up. But I don't have pictures of that, sadly. So that was a daft project. But I love that particular era because the fronts are very aggressive, really. They're about as mean as you can be. And the white one was just wonderful to drive. It had so much power. And it turned heads too. You pull up alongside a huge SUV and just gun the motor, and the driver would look down and go white. And then it would just surge forward. It was brilliantly funny to drive from that point of view. But anyway, that's how to waste money. Do I like modern cars? Yes, sometimes, yes. But I still like lowriders, that's the trouble. But lowriders are contemporary. Although Mario died 6 months ago, he has 2 sons and 3 grandchildren who still build lowriders. I have to mention at this point, Mario was the second person to be elected to the Lowriders Hall of Fame. And I had a problem. How would I insure these cars? I thought it would be eye-wateringly expensive. So no, Mario said, no, you must phone Hegarty's. They're up in Detroit. And speak to this particular man. And he'll do a deal for you. Yeah, no problem. So I phoned the man at Hegarty's and said I had 4 Thunderbirds consecutive years. And how much would it be to insure them? So we can't do that. Well, I've got garages for them, and I told them what they're going to do with them. I said, no, sorry, it's completely out of the question. I said, no, that's a shame. I said, Mario D'Alba said you'd be able to help me. There was a little silence at the end of the line. He said, oh, in that case, it'll be $135. So I said, well, 4 times 135, no, $150. That's $600. No, Andrew. It's be $150 for all 4. So I said, that's a deal. And I said, of course, I realised a while ago that Mario is God. And again, there was a little silence at the other end in Detroit, and he said, yes, I think you're right. So that's how I came to possess 4 Thunderbirds. I'm still drawn back to that particular shape. It's just a brilliant shape. Any other question? Don't know I answered your question, but it's a story.
What do you drive now?
Well, I've driven it ever since I can remember. It's a 2004, which is, my memory is not good, 2004 Golf. It's the first one with the new engine. But my son has just bought a 2007 one, which someone crashed into, so I had to took it round to my friend Mick, who's Mick's Body Works. I said, oh, that's all right, he said, when I told him about it. That's the best Golf there is. Yeah. It's the strongest one. He said, do not buy anything later than 2010. So it has all of, 56,000 miles on it since 2004. So, I drive a lot.
How much bigger are they than how much bigger? This is a technical question. I'm going to bore the audience. How much bigger are the Polaroid prints than the original Polaroid? By what magnification have they grown?
Right. So the original Polaroid is about palm-sized. They're not actually square. They're just off square, slightly taller. So we could call it 4 inches square, couldn't we? It goes up to 44 inches. That's the degree of enlargement. And I did it using my Nikon camera, which is a D800E, since someone's going to ask me that, which has been voted the best digital camera in the world. So I bought it purely by chance from some people called Fixations, who are now down at the Oval, who have been repairing my cameras and doing photographic stuff for me since about 1970. Yeah. But I just lucked out. Again, it's a bit story like Hegarty's insurance. I went in to buy a camera with no money, much, and he said, "Oh, well, we've got this one in." He said, "A lady bought it 10 days ago and just bought it back an hour ago. She didn't like it. So you can have it for 2,000 quid. Well, no, make it 1,500. So I bought this camera, which was worth 6,000 at that point, for 1,500. And it's just fantastic. And I don't use probably half the features on it. I can understand why the lady didn't like it very much, but it is a brilliant camera. It got better resolution than getting it laser scanned, and of course doesn't cost anything. I think that's dealt with that one. Any other questions?
So given that the automotive design in America has completely changed, I mean, how do you relate to sort of contemporary design, which is very globalized and has become less American, I imagine?
Or else we've become more American. No, I remember as a child, a time I was at the station looking at steam trains, reading articles about the amount of gas that a American car uses, and these Thunderbirds were very economical. They were doing 12 miles to the gallon. I mean that's a US gallon, so it's slightly smaller than our UK gallon. So that's the big driver, and of course computers have made them far more efficient. So I remember David Greene and I sitting down when I taught him. We worked out in his new car there were 104 computer chips of various kinds. And what became interesting to me was when O.J. Simpson was chased down the 405 by the police. They could have stopped him by disabling the computers in his car with an electromagnetic pulse, but couldn't do so because the car would then be out of control, would ram into all the other cars on the 405. And about 10 days later, it was on, I can't remember if it's on Sunset or Hollywood, east of the freeway, there was a hold-up, bank hold-up, and the guys drove away in a 1968 Chevrolet rather than a contemporary car because it had no computers in it. They also realised why the police didn't stop OJ. But this is an interesting factor. It's also pretty much every airport has an EMP, I think, to disable airplanes who are This is since 9/11. So what do I think about design? What was interesting when on the beach, about the turn of the century, I'd see people from car companies in Japan photographing people's trainers and toys that people were playing with on the beach, plastic toys. And I asked why. Well, this seemed an odd thing to do, being inquisitive and nosy. And they were going back to Tokyo with these images, and they were designing cars 3 years down the line to echo the way these things, the forms that they could see. So it would capture the new buyers of the, young buyers of cars, Japanese cars, and of course, eventually American cars as well. So that's a lot of what we see are based on what children now are playing with.
Yeah, I was wondering why Japanese cars are so old.
So old.
No, that's not true.
Well, they're built to last. The English cars fell apart. Americans just abandoned their cars. Of course, they can afford to leave them at the side of the road or in a field or in somewhere in the desert. So that's they have a different attitude to them. Yeah. What do we have? Anything else about cars? Don't know.
We got a truck.
Truck?
You ever had a truck?
Well, an American would mean by a truck, a pickup, or a large pickup. But no, I've never had a pickup. And the great thing about pickups or trucks, as they call them, is you don't pay tax on them. They're tax-free. You don't have to pay. So that's why they're extremely popular. But the SUV and the trucks are de rigueur in California. It's I can see why you want one, why you use one. Yeah. So sort of also the traffic in LA, the 405. I said there was 1 million more people in the US since I've been going there, but most of them are driving the 405. So when I first met Mario, around the turn of the century, therefore, you could go from Santa Monica to Montclair, which is 53 miles in 53 minutes. Now it might take you 120 minutes if you were lucky. So this has a huge impact. My friends I became a member of the Los Angeles Inventors Club. The sole criteria for joining it was A, to know 1 or 2 people, but also to turn up at Santa Monica Airport at the Typhoon restaurant on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock and eat at a table where we'd discuss things like what was so good about an Epson printer? Why was it the best? And there'd be someone at the table who would know and could talk to you for 20 minutes of why exactly it was the best printer. But they'd discuss things like, I've just seen 10 seconds of film on the internet, And there was someone there who invented a folding, how would we call it, an extension to a computer or a phone so that you could have a keyboard in your pocket. He insisted that you would never, ever have a touch typing. That would never work. You'd always have to press a thing. How wrong he was. And I said, I don't believe you at the time. So it was a funny group. My friends were funny people, odd people, knew odd things, had very strange interests. Yeah. I got introduced to odd people, like Little Daddy Ed Roth, for instance, customizers, and Bob Spina, who did all the pinstriping work for Big Daddy, Ed Roth. And I call him the best painter in the world. Certainly the best painter of a line in the world. Incredible. Met some odd people. Yeah.
Amazing. I think on that note, perhaps,
I think we should.
We can continue conversations over drinks. You can find out more tips about how to get away, the best car to get away from a bank robbery, find out about printers, and hear more about the painter of stripes. So please join me in thanking Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you.